The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 teachers in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with the Tennessee academic standards. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu. This video is aligned with the following Tennessee academic standards.
So this is the website for the College Ready Writers Program. There's some tabs midway across there that if you hover over them, it'll make for a drop-down menu. So if you hover over instructional resources, you'll see those routine mini units. There's on-demand writing, and then extended is there. Extended research arguments, if you click there, it will take you to this screen. And the top link there is the position paper that I was talking about earlier. And then the bottom one is the new community research arguments, which you're seeing material from here. So all the handouts that I've given you so far, plus what I'm about to give you, comes from this community research arguments page, and this is what it looks like. I have some tabs underneath the title there. So there's the project sequence. If you click on there, that's where you'll find the pink handout that you have right now. That's the project sequence, where it maps out step by step the instructional moves that the teacher needs to make. It's very flexible. Like I didn't like on this day do this. I didn't do any of that. Okay, it's made for this is what you're going to need to consider. This is what you're going to need to give time for, and you can work out the number of days and that. But this it kind of presents the order that you should approach that in. And then the student samples. There's a whole host of student samples there. Okay, so once we complete the detailed research report, I give my students a break. They've spent a bunch of time, a bunch of energy. You can see them start to get a little frazzled with it. Usually when they get into that analysis and see all the possible solutions and the complexities and the obstacles that each of those solutions might face, if they've got a really complex topic, who had the rural road sample? Was that back here? Yeah. That was tough for those guys. I mean, we're Stillwater County. Stillwater River Road is blocked off by a landslide. The county hasn't cleaned it up, and they're upset about that because they recreate, they fish, they hunt. They like that road. And the county hasn't cleaned it up, which means that they have to drive way around to get where they want to go. And they want it fixed. Well, when they get into it, they find out in their evidence that it's going to be really expensive to fix, and it isn't as simple as just bulldozing it out of the way. That rock wants to fall, and even more rock behind that wants to fall. So they would have to it's going to cost millions of dollars. They're going to have to put stepped layers into that side of that rock, and maybe put the chain net up, I anchored into the rock to hold it and to prevent future rock slides. And the county doesn't have the money to do it. So, what do we do with that? That's complex. I don't know what to do, and I'm frazzled now. And I'm like, okay, well, let's take a break. Let's go on to this other topic. We're going to talk about driverless cars, right? And that's the text set right now that's available. And they've been adding on the College Ready Writers Program website. They've been adding new text sets, so you can switch it up and grab ones that you think that your students would be more interested in. But right now, driverless cars is the text set for them making the case in an op-ed. And I've got a video here of my students with that. So I thought I'd just play it. It's going to blare like right at the back of your head. So
I want to say something, Casey.
Yes, please.
I had an aha moment in one of your sessions.
Yeah.
And I think I've shared it with the Warren County teachers, but it was when you said, and to truly have a good argument, for your students to truly have a good argument, they have to be able to present the opposing side in a way in which the opposing side would agree with them.
Right.
And that to me that's when I finally kind of understood argument writing. And
right.
So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and so it's technically that's called the Rogerian Argument. Psychiatrist Carl Rogers came up with like in mental institutions when patients were in conflict with each other, his process for working through that conflict was to seat those people across the table from each other and ask them to explain to each other why they were upset, and the person across the table would have to then repeat back and state why that person was upset in a way that they would agree with. So that is an important angle for students to take, especially I find in the politics of small town communities. You need to understand genuinely why that person is saying that we don't have the money right now to fix that rock slide, or you need to accurately portray what they believe, especially if you're going to go print it in the paper. And so that was something that we would really focus on, like just humility, generosity, but looking at what the evidence says and letting the evidence lead you to the solution that would best fix the problem. And trying to like detach emotional investment that I need it to be fixed in this way because that's what would fix my emotions. That's what I want.
Did you have the case with any of your kids or any of your groups where they went through the process and at the end, oh, now I have to argue that really this can't be done?
That happened over here. Did you all see that? Right? The process was, we need to fix this. We need to get in fact, the student who took that on, when he made his announcement to the class as to what topic he was going to do, he said that the state just, the Fish and Game just doesn't want to fix it because they don't want to plow the rock in on top of the fish. They're worried about the fish in the river or something. Well, when he gets into it, it has nothing to do with the state, has nothing to do with the fish. I'm worried about the fish. I don't want you to bulldoze it in there, but that wasn't the issue. Like there's other ways they could have fixed it. But the problem was, we don't have the money, and if you temporarily fix it, it could kill somebody if they drive underneath it. Just the vibration of the vehicle moving underneath it. There's a huge rock, and there's actually, they went in and found like the geological engineers had like diagrams of like the rock and like photos of the rock where they added like labels in and annotated it to show, here's this huge rock that's waiting to fall, and you're worried about the stuff down here. And so like they shifted. But I think if you look at it like in the conclusion of the detailed research report, they weren't quite there. They hit a spot where they were frazzled and they didn't know what to argue.
Oh, honey.
And giving them the break, let them come back with the clarity that, okay, the evidence needs to lead us. And so when they made their op-ed, it looks completely different from where they started when they first started writing about the topic. And like that is part of the process of becoming informed. Sometimes becoming informed means we might need to change our mind about things. And that's an important lesson to convey.
Yeah, that it's okay to change your mind.
Yeah. In fact,
because sometimes they come in and they're this is what I think, this is how I want to think it.
So narrow.
Right. They're very, and a word I like to use is they're very entrenched in what they think.
Yes.
But becoming informed is an important part. And if we go back to like making sure that rural perspectives are shared with national audiences or with larger audiences, allowing my students to like become part of bigger conversations. When they do that, they don't really help themselves if they do that from a state of entrenchment. If what they really believe is true and needs to be argued, they should be able to support that with evidence.
And if they can't, then they...
And if you can't, you might want to change your mind about it. So.
And do you have that conversation with them? If
I
you
do.
can't support this with evidence, It's change your mind.
Yeah, it's a frequent conversation. But then the mini units help me do that because there's like connecting evidence to claims is a mini unit. Ranking evidence.
Brain mini unit, that very saying.
Yeah.
It's okay for you to decide that maybe your brain's impulsive.
Yeah.
But some of these students, the complete 180 isn't where they end up. They might move to more from an extreme to the complex middle, right? That's a shift too, and we should respect that shift. If a student can open up and at least hear what the other side has to say, even if they don't change their mind about it, that act of opening up is a moment of growth, and that's an important, they crack the door open a little bit to moving on to future growth. All right, so this is the making the case in an op-ed.
My sophomores, I'm teaching a mini unit with the National Writing Project's College Ready Writers Program. And it's a mini unit about line of reasoning, developed by Linda Denstedt.
These cars don't have feelings. They can't make ethical choices, right?
So the sophomores have a packet of text that they're working with about driverless car technology. And some of those texts go into all the benefits of having driverless cars. Some of them point out some limitations of driverless cars and where we might need to, as a culture, as a society, think ahead as to where we might be headed.
Driverless cars are not ready for the roads because of the array of situations that drivers today face.
Too many flaws with the technology so far.
Okay, so let's go on with that. You just start a new sentence.
At the start of it, the kids were so opinionated about it. They had, they're just starting to drive themselves. They've just received their driver's licenses, and now to find out that there are people who think that there should be driverless cars that would drive them around when they just got that ability.
I really enjoy driving cars. It's probably one of, I guess you could say, my favorite things to do. I like driving, I like going on trips.
Okay, so just so we have balance in the classroom, I'm going to argue the other side today.
Very quick with their positions, but they've become more educated. They're coming to, they become more informed, and they're coming to understandings about the different concerns.
In the United States alone, some 30,000 people are killed and more than 2 million injured in crashes every year, and the vast majority of them are caused by human error.
So the idea of a self-driving car is just kind of different. I'm not really for it because I don't feel it's safe, because you can never really rely on technology.
We moved into reading text and text from Google and text from the New York Times Room for Debate, where multiple sides of the issue were talked about, discussed, evidence was provided, and they're just surrounded on all sides by evidence and more evidence and claims and more claims, and they're sorting through which evidence supports which claims.
Maybe like the 20-second delay at intersections for people that aren't in a driverless car.
And trying to track the line of reasoning in each writer's perspective.
In a sentence or two, what's the purpose of Kahlo's piece? All right? What's the purpose? What's the most relevant evidence that she provides us? But also, what are the limitations, okay? That's that same pattern we're pulling over from the note catcher that we just worked with on that jigsaw activity, all right? We're looking at her one piece now. What's the most important, relevant evidence that she provides, and what are the limitations?
And that has informed them to now be able to create a line of reasoning.
Which kind?
And it's a complicated issue. And it's really allowed the sophomores to talk about it from a very personal way. They all enjoy driving. They all want to drive. But it's also made them really think about facts and the statistics involved and weigh out, rather than just have a one-sided view on the issue. They've had to grow and really consider what else is out there and look at, even though they might feel a certain way about driverless car technology.
Hyundai did a test because they have lane keep assist and automatic braking and stuff. And the semi-truck stopped, all 5 of the cars stopped.
That is sweet.
Yeah.
You got 3 articles, pull it all together.
And they promise benefits of mobility, efficiency, congestion, and land use.
They've had to consider what other people might have to say about it, and it's that first little step in really considering what the other side has to say, and I've really enjoyed watching them grow as a part of that.
Start to notice that, okay? Claim, evidence. The claim, if it stands alone, that indicates a limitation, right?
Driverless cars should not be put on the road because they aren't needed and they can't handle the potential hazards.
When you're talking to other people in your class, they might think of something that you're not thinking of or have a different way of explaining what's happening that you don't understand. So if you're not understanding something, then they explain it better than you, or they have a different way of looking at it. So then you have just more than your own personal opinion on the subject.
Driverless cars are already safer than those driven by humans, and their safety will only continue to grow.
This is a huge change in how the curriculum works, and so I'm really enjoying it here, and I love how he teaches.
One of the beauties of the National Writing Project's College Ready Writers program is that by stacking up these lessons about specific skills about argument, we're going to take the lessons that we learned from the line of reasoning mini unit that we got from the National Writing Project's College Ready Writers program, and we're going to write op-ed pieces about those community issues, taking what we've learned about lines of reasoning from the mini unit and applying it to the research that the students have already done, and making arguments to our community about issues that the students have identified and evidence that with evidence that they've collected. And it's just been so rewarding in my classroom.
So that kind of hints at how we do it. One of the beauties of that mini unit, though, is it gives them some really, really good models of opinion editorial writing. So this is one of the pieces from the New York Times Room for Debate. And you know, we can go through the mini unit, but then I also like to maybe, like, once we've gone through the mini unit in that 4 to 6 day window, as we're returning back to the community project, I might go back to some of those op-ed examples. You know, the students through the mini unit get an opportunity to write an op-ed about driverless cars. So we actually take a break, and in that 4 to 6 day window, they actually write on a different topic and have a piece that they could work with. Did you see in the paper when it zoomed in on the paper, there were actually pieces published on driverless cars in the paper? So if I have students who move into the community, like midway as we're in this, like we've already written a detailed research report, I usually have them, I gave, like that was from the first year we did it, I gave them the opportunity of publishing that piece in the local paper. The second year I did it, I thought, you know, that isn't probably the audience for that. The local community probably doesn't care about driverless cars right now, but there were other opportunities. So, you know, the National Writing Project right now has an initiative and a website called Letters to the Next President. So if they wanted to maybe make their argument to the next president, they could write a letter to the next president. They have a site called youthvoices.live. So that is another location where students go and actually start conversations with other students around the country, and it's monitored by teachers. You know, I'm one of the teachers on the payroll of that site, monitoring what students put on there and the conversations that they have. Okay, so that's a safe spot to go. But there's a lot of opportunities for students to go make their arguments elsewhere. And Teen Inc. is another one that we use, teeninc.com. So, but the beauty of it is, like, once we get done with the driverless cars mini unit, we've got some really good models of op-eds from that. So this is an op-ed that was published in the New York Times. We can go back to that. And you know, you were holding up the planning document. The planning document, they actually use a planning document in the mini unit. They're first introduced to that planning document in the mini unit to map out their driverless cars op-ed. So they're familiar with it when we come back to the community project. So they know how to use it. They know what goes into those spots. And I know when you're looking at it right now, it probably looks really confusing and complex, or isn't really clear what is where. So might need, can I get somebody's help to maybe pass somebody's help? So I have a blank planning document, and then I have I've created a how to use that, like a step-by-step what to do with that in order to plan it.
My question is actually about labeling the evidence. I am not familiar with this system of. Right. Yes, I see that, but like, right. What does this mean? Illustrate, authorize, extend when they're looking at pieces of evidence. Wonderful. Okay.
There's a handout for that.
Yes,
always. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, would you mind? This table's covered. Yeah, so she's asking about, like, I think most, if not all, the planning documents that I've passed out. There's some coding usually down the left-hand side, and you'll see like I and A, and this one has AOS. So those come from this book, Rewriting, by Joseph Harris, and it's a college composition text for college writing. It's that typical like college 101 type guide and textbook. Joseph Harris designed the college writing program at Duke University, and he published this text. It's just 5 chapters long. I actually bought a classroom set. I like it so much. But the first chapter is coming to terms, like coming to understand what the other people are saying, so that you can like use their arguments either to agree with them or disagree with them. And then the second chapter is called Forwarding. And so on that like code guide I just handed out, the very top has forwarding moves that you can use. So I might use a quote that I lift out of a piece of evidence. Like if I read an article, I can lift a sentence or two out of that, and I could use that to illustrate what the point I was trying to make. I can use it to authorize. So if it's a really credible source, like if I want to make, if I wanted to make an argument, say about the rural road conditions in my community, interviewing the person who's in charge of that department in our county, that would be a way of authorizing my argument because I've talked to a person in authority about that. Or like that move my students made when they went out and looked at the crosswalks with our school resource officer. When they quote him, it might be illustrating what they're trying to say, but by using him to do that, they're also authorizing. So they're adding to the credibility of their own argument by using authorities to quote from. And then sometimes you disagree with the source, but you can use their quotes from their material then to push back on their ideas. And so the countering moves help them do that. And so when they're coding that planning document, they are planning out how they might use that source material, so they do it deliberately rather than just like that way that we see a lot of students do it, where they just drop a quote into their paper.
Could you say a little more about extending?
Extending is a little more complicated, and it doesn't happen often, but it's when you present someone else's ideas as the spot where you're going to jump off and go a little bit further. So like this person argues this, and I would go a step further and say this. Okay, I agree with them, but I think we could actually also go here. This might be an area that they hadn't thought of, and I might go a little bit further. There's actually one other one that it's really tough for my students to understand. It's more of a college level, but it's called borrowing, where let's say I as a teacher I'm writing an op-ed about teaching, but I wanted to borrow an analogy from somebody who works in agriculture. And so I could borrow what they were talking about raising their crop, but then I could come and apply it to another context. That's borrowing. So that's all covered in here, and he has a chapter on forwarding and he has a chapter on countering. What I've done is I've digested that a little bit and turned it into coding so that my students can label in and make like decisions about how they might use the evidence in the source material. Okay. Okay. So there's the document. You should have a how-to. document that has this up at the top with like an A, B, C, and D label. Once we transition away from the mini unit, I have my students go back and look at the conclusion of their detailed research report. They know how to make a claim. We've done that through several mini units, and we've also just done that in the driverless cars argument that they just made. They've made a claim about that. Now they know what a claim is. They know how to construct a claim, but I can talk about a little more about how to construct a claim here in a minute. But they know how to construct a claim. So I tell them to go look at that conclusion and see if they can pull a claim out of it or if they can construct a claim from it. And usually they'll want to construct a claim from it because their thoughts weren't complete when they wrote that conclusion in that messiness, right? So when they come to that claim, usually a sentence or two, they write that, it's labeled A on the how-to up there at the top. That's their initial claim. And it works for a number of reasons. Number one, I mean, if you think in thesis, like the thesis structure, a thesis paper, the thesis is that central idea that drives the rest of the paper, right? So that anchors our paper. That's the start. But there's a couple ways I think of it. That is the initial claim, and that helps them like start the introduction. Like it really helps focus an introduction. And I don't want it to just be the last sentence in the first paragraph. It might come naturally as the very first sentence. This is what I think, and this is why. And then they're going to work through their evidence, but it makes the conclusion make more sense if the conclusion is a more nuanced claim that they've developed through the presentation of evidence. Here's the claim I want to start with, but after presenting all this evidence, here's what I want you to do with it. And I'm going to state that as a new set of claims, if that makes sense. So then you don't just get that blah introduction or that conclusion that just restates everything that was just said in the paper, right? I want the conclusion to have a purpose and a motive and a goal. So they can argue that this is what we should do next based on everything that I've just presented.
Like persuasion again, isn't it? Where you're persuading them to get up and go and do something.
But that's what a letter to the editor is trying to do. It's trying to say, here's something that you might not know about, and here's what we should do about it.
Right, but it gives it a purpose.
Right, absolutely. And going back to it, you know, we can use this as a model. Students can actually then, like they're experienced with like the planning document there. We can even, like I've done it where I take a blank planning document and I can draw that planning document up on my whiteboard, and they have copies of this, and they can help me reconstruct what her plan might have looked like. You know, from her intro, what was her initial claim? Okay, what evidence did she collect? And then on the right-hand side, we actually order the evidence into paragraphs. We can deconstruct this and like take it apart and put it back together. And you know, you go back to workshopping. Isn't that what you do in like mechanics? When you go to learn mechanics, you take things apart and you put them back together. You understand the ins and outs of it, and that helps them design good arguments. So down the left-hand side, I like to think that, the way I pitch it at my students is that's just a parking lot. It's where you collect just evidence that would support your claim. And so in cells 1 through 4, I want them to collect 3 to 4 pieces of evidence from what they've gathered to support their evidence. But by the time they get to this point with the detailed research report, usually they've got more than 4 that they want to use. We're limited to 500 words, so I let them throw a lot in there. So if some of the student samples, you'll see they have more. They're like doubling up on cells and writing in 2 in those locations. Maybe they're doubling those up to say that, you know what, in one paragraph, I could probably pair these 2 together. These seem to be like related, and I could put those together and actually use them like one after another to make the same point that I'm trying to make. And then down here, I save cell 5 for the countering view. Some of the student samples you'll see might have 2 countering views, like there's more than 1 countering point. But the way I pitch it at them, as they're holding this in front of them to make their argument, I say, you know, this thing that you believe, someone out there might disagree with you, right? And they'll all nod their heads. And then I'll say, what evidence will they point to disagree with you? What will they bring up? I want you to write it down right now. And so then they write that in there. And then cell 6, that's where I say, okay, this thing that they've brought up, this evidence that they've pointed to, what evidence can you point to counter what they just said, to refute what they just countered you with? And if you can't do that, you might have to change your mind, right? If you can't counter the counter argument, you might have to change your mind. And you can see some kids just like, oh no, I have to do that. But that's a moment of cognitive dissonance where they're like just kind of shaking off their game a little bit, and they have to think it through, and really neat things happen as a result of that. But a lot of them have evidence. They'll say, this is the evidence I'm going to point to. It might shift the focus, like I wanted to do this with the dress code, but I might have to give up some things and really focus on these one or two things that I really have strong evidence for, because the counter argument, I don't have anything to answer the counter argument right now with these other things. Okay, and so that gets them actually to focus and clarify and work through the complexity.
This one, fear of dad is her counter argument.
And which topic was that?
It was on your, when waking up later.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, they interviewed the principal of if he had any trouble when he was their age waking up to get to school, and he said, I didn't have any trouble getting up because I had fear of my father. Yeah. But then we move to like more deliberate work on the right-hand side. The right-hand side, you can see that's labeled paragraph 1, paragraph 2. Which evidence, okay, if this is your claim up at the top, which evidence would you want to start with? Okay, which one do you want to follow up that claim with? Do you want to start right away and get the counter argument out of the way? Okay, if you do that, you want to probably bring 5 and 6 together and plug them into paragraph 1. If not, if you need to make your case first, which order, which supporting evidence are you going to put there in that first paragraph, and what are you going to follow it up with? Do you want to save your strongest evidence for last, or do you want to like start strong and then give additional support? Okay, so they make their decisions, and there's not a formulaic way to do this. You know, we can look at multiple op-eds and deconstruct them and put them back together and have conversations from the New York Times and look and see that they're not constructed in the same way. Like the writers have multiple varied ways of constructing the evidence and their argument. So this isn't a formulaic 5-paragraph essay. This is strategic, deliberate moves that students use to construct an argument. And if they can learn how to do that and learn that they can do it in multiple ways, then they are ready to write in response to almost anything, which is what we want for them the day after they graduate. You know, I want them ready to do that as sophomores. For me, they have to take the ACT. In our state, they take all of them. All the juniors take the ACT. I want them ready for whatever topic they get thrown at them. Because you can't predict which position you'll take on the prompt that you're given. So I want them ready to construct it in whatever way they need to construct it, and this is the way I do it. So that's the planning document. That's available on the site, so there's live links there if you access it. And like the source material moves, the ones with the codes, is embedded into that document. So if you access that document, you can bring that one up there as well. And then I've also got a link there actually to that book where it'll take you straight to Amazon where you could order that book if you want to order it. I don't get any profit from Joseph Harris' book. I love it that much. So there's the coding. Illustrating, authorizing, extending. Here, countering, you know, a lot of them like initially see that arguing the other side is really easy. Like if they argue this, I'm going to go the opposite direction. But as they get into the complexity, dissenting actually becomes more popular because what they say might be true, but there might be a point where it ceases to be true. And so their goal then is to point out that position. At what point does it cease to be true and why? And that's part of their argument then. And that would then create a positive argument that would lead to a solution that you might be able to convince other people that your argument is valid and credible, and they might want to change their mind about it if you can approach it in that way. What you're saying is true up until this point, and then this is the reason it's not true from that point on. Okay, that might be a way, like back to persuasion, to persuade others to believe what you believe, because you'll never get anybody who doesn't already agree with you to agree with you if you stack the deck or manipulate what they believe. And I try to emphasize that and drive that one home quite a bit. And then uncovering values, between what words are used or not used. when people are making that argument. I use like this year I'm using the election a lot for that. Like there's a lot of times that people are using language or they're not using language, and you can even see examples where candidates are trying to uncover values in what's being said or not being said on the opposing side. Okay. So sample planners I handed out. All right, making claims. They review their research report. What we get down to is claims consist of the topic and either a course of action or an assertion of truth. Okay, our crosswalks need to be widened. Okay, there's the topic and the course of action because why? Or our sidewalks are in need of replacement because, so there's a course of action. Our sidewalks are falling apart. That's an assertion of a truth. So that's two different ways to go about arguing the same issue, but it can go either way, and I let them choose and let them make the deliberate choice as to the direction they go. Are you going to assert something, or are you going to argue a course of action in that claim? And then the big part is the why, because the why, the reasons why. Argument is a reason or a set of reasons you believe what you believe. So the argument comes in the why. When we ask questions on tests and things like that, where we say, we ask a question and then the next question is why, we're asking them to construct the argument as to why that initial statement that they're going to make is what it is. So the examples I gave, parking on Main Street must be changed. So there's a course of action because the danger it poses to drivers. And then parking on Main Street is dangerous. So that's an assertion of truth rather than the course of action. But the course of action might come later. They might be saving the course of action then for the conclusion.
Do we have access to this somewhere?
There are, I don't know that I have that there, but I believe I have it in the pink. And if I don't, I will make it available.
So you're making trendy again the ancient art of sophistry.
I'm
It's good. I like it. It's like
positive solution-oriented citizenship.
there you go.
Yeah. So there it is, and it's once students get used to it, it's just a graphic organizer. But we start at the top, we work down the left side. And then we're able to start at the top and then pull over from the left side to construct the organization. And then when students go to write, I'll conference with them and I'll actually draw arrows. I'll draw an arrow from that claim down to that first paragraph. I'm like, okay, so this is the direction you're gonna go. And often what I'll tell them is in cell 4, 5, or 6, whatever the last open cell they have, I'll say write in conclusion in that one. And the conclusion, they might not know what they're going to conclude until they go through all that evidence and they get that clarity from there. The messiness of the detailed research report, we're leaving that behind and we're really trying to focus what we believe. And this is what, a lot of us give students, including me in my previous teaching, we give students one opportunity to research and make their point. This is, I think the student work that I've included, and I've included all their op-eds, the student work that I've included makes the argument that if we give students more time to get informed, we give them time and we teach them how to organize, that they can really come to really sharp, polished pieces. I don't want to agree with this school dress code argument. I don't want to agree with it. For a number of reasons. As a teacher, there's just some spots in there. For me as a male teacher, trying to deliver the dress code and address the dress code, enforce the dress code. With female students, it's really tricky. I'm also a father of twin daughters, and I don't I want to be. Have a trouble not being very conservative about that. But at the same time, I read their op-ed and I go, wow, that's a really good argument. That's really compelling. And that's something else that they can come to realize. They can just appreciate somebody's argument, but they don't have to agree with them. That's okay. I don't have to demonize people I don't agree with. Wow, that's a really compelling argument. It makes me shift a little bit. It makes me okay, I have to reevaluate what I think. I haven't completely changed what I believe, but I'm reevaluating it. And I'm measuring what I believe based on the argument they've made. And we should expect that. We should expect that our arguments aren't always going to be able to change people's minds, but we should be able to make them think. So that's a goal, yes?
Does this ever take on a debate spin where they have to devil's advocate with, okay, they've done this research, they're on this side, and then spur of the moment they have to counter everything that they've set up?
I mean, they're related, but that thing that you're talking about, I try to get them to anticipate it. So a good argument should anticipate the counter arguments. Like, I shouldn't make my argument oblivious to what other people are going to say about it. So I should try to anticipate it and actually step into their shoes. Why do they believe what they believe? And if I'm going to try to get them to change their minds about it, I need to be able to think through what and why they might say it. And then speak to the thing, like, is it a fear? How could I speak to that fear? How could I alleviate that fear and so I think my response to what you were asking is like more nuanced than maybe you were hoping for, but like like with the position paper, my students really have to anticipate, like if they take on one of those hot button issues like vaccinations or something like that, they have to anticipate what the other side is going to say. And then they actually shift, and we do a cross-curricular. I work with my colleague at the senior level who teaches government, and he does a mock legislature. So the students write mock legislation based on the topic that they just researched, and they have to argue with their peers to try to like build up support to try to get their legislation passed. And in order to do that, you're never going to convince anybody if you distort or manipulate what you believe, you're just going to upset them. So don't go upset all those people in the room that you're going to try to, like, you're going to need votes from. Go speak to their fears to alleviate those fears, and the way you're going to do that is to anticipate and understand why they feel the way they do. And so, okay. Okay. So here's the full process, and this is what the site looks like. I've tried to arrange each, like if you click on student samples on the site, you're going to see, I tried to build it in a table so that you could see it all at once. Like and if you want to use this with students, I'd say feel free and do that. Like I often like grab the link and share a page on Google Classroom with my students of this is what you've done, and this is where we're at now, and this is where we're headed, that kind of thing. But here's the detailed research report, there's the planning document, there's the op-ed. It's packaged in a way that you can open up that Google Doc right there and print that off if you needed to. Or you could share the individual Google Doc if you wanted to do that digitally. You can click on that, and the way I printed off the op-eds for you, I just clicked on that and printed it right out of the browser. So if you click on that, it will like enlarge it, and you can print it from there. And then the same thing with this is the PDF. I just got PDFs back from the paper after they printed them. And I did some coaching in the planning document, or the sequence document, the pink document, that will like give you some considerations to take in building that relationship with like the editor of the local paper and things like that. And then there's the link down below that is a Google Doc that will take you to a Google Doc version of that student op-ed if you wanted to print it in that way rather than the paper formatting. So each student sample has that full process there available.
Just to clarify,
yeah.
the break where you do the meeting with the text set, that's between
these two.
Okay.
Yeah, between the detailed research report and the reasoning planning. Because they learn how to use how to plan.
They start by analyzing and then they apply that to their own plan. Okay.
But we also go to a vanilla topic like driverless cars to then come back to this this topic that's really maybe frazzled them, that they're like not sure what side is up. Okay? But it gives them some clarity. And then the planning, like here's my initial claim on that, but I'm kind of finding where the evidence is leading me through the structure of that planning document, so that I come to a solution based on the evidence. They have to be very deliberate, and they can't do it just from opinion. They have to have the evidence to support them. And if they don't have evidence to support what they've wanted to argue initially, they might have to shift. Yeah. So here's an interesting one. High school classrooms are messy. I had a group of girls working on a really brilliant suicide awareness project, and they started not to get along. And so I had to give them permission to split apart. So 2 of them went and did a reasoning plan up at the top, and 1 went and did a reasoning plan by herself, and they ended up with 2 op-eds, and they're both really, really good op-eds. Okay, they made their argument to the community, and they structured it as an argument that every school in the county needed to increase their awareness of suicide and their interventions of suicide because it was such a big problem in the state. They focused on entirely different things because they started with different claims, so they took different angles on it. I think the top one, it's a threat and everybody needs to be aware of it. The bottom one says that we're the number 1 in the country for suicide rates, and we need to fix that. And we've been in the top 5 for 40 years. That's a problem. And so, like, they come at it from different angles, but I can tell you that got printed in the paper, I think in like end of May, beginning of June, and the second day of school, the day before the students showed up at school, I sat through 2.5 hours of suicide intervention and awareness training from the director of the Health and Human Performance Division from the state capitol. So it was every teacher, every aide, every bus driver, the cooks, and every administrator, because 3 students wrote letters. And it worked out, even though they didn't get along, they all ended up causing change, right? I've been coached on what to do if I notice something. I've been coached on what to look for. And so now I have more training. For a rural school like mine, where we're far away from training like that, I feel more prepared.
Yeah, I was warned by the principal last year not to discuss the element of suicide when we were doing Romeo and Juliet, okay, that it was like. And then this year, complete turnaround, and this year we got a new guy in, and we've got to talk about it.
They talk about that. They talk about how people are afraid to talk about it because it'll encourage people to do that, and the research shows that's not true. So the evidence led them to make an argument and they made the argument, and then not only did they make it to the community, they made it to all the school officials, and they made it in that broadcast to, like, here's a message that goes out to the entire county so that the school officials can't just like tuck it in a desk. That, guess what, the taxpayers are aware of this now. But it was positive. I mean, my superintendent is a really like responsive guy. He saw that, he talked to the school board about it, he said we need to bring this in, and they made it happen.
Yeah, it's great.
And, so it was positive.